also refers to a method of analysis. That's why it's called cultural criticism. Okay. Now, culture criticism of culture is a part of cultural criticism, but it is not restricted or limited to only criticizing culture as such. Now, what is this method and how did it get developed? Where did it arise from, or what is the origin of cultural criticism? The origin lies in cultural studies. Now, this is a kind of discipline. Now, yes, an established discipline. Uh, some people do have a problem with this nomenclature. Some thinkers would not like to call it a discipline per se. They say that this is not a discipline. This is just a mix of different notions, theories, and methods of analysis. But some do support this stance that this is a discipline in its own right. How did it originate? We know, and we, as students of literature, many of us are, I think, students of literature. So we tend to think that we criticize literature from different perspectives. For example, we can have Marxist criticism, we can have psychoanalytical criticism, we can have feminist criticism. So these are different viewpoints through which we try to look at a given text and try to analyze that. But cultural studies, if we want to pinpoint the origin of it, we will have to go to 1960s Britain and then see what was happening in Birmingham University. In 1963, a Center for Cultural Studies was established in Birmingham University, and there is a small story behind that. There were people like T.B. Thompson, Fogart, and Raymond Williams who were doing independent researches, so to say, and they had published a few books. Raymond Williams was very interested in understanding how the meanings of words go on changing. So what he did was he collected, let's say, a big group of words, and he wrote a book about that. That's called keywords. And one of the keywords, that is important word, was culture. And Raymond Williams says that he understood from his own experience. He had also participated in the Second World War. And when he came back from the war, he saw that people were talking about culture. They were not only talking about culture, they were also talking about culture in different ways. Earlier, the meaning of culture was regarding high culture, a developed test, a sophisticated test for empathy, which comes to you from the best of things that you can gather in your life. For example, if you read best of literature, you'll get some test, right? If you meet best people, then you'll understand the quality of life, etc. So culture was understood in that sense before the World War background. But then Raymond Williams realized that now people who are working as labor in factories or people who are poor, who are living in slum areas, they are talking about their own ways of celebrating something, their own festivals, their own dances, their own songs, their own whatever pieces of writing, or whatever expression they have as a community. And that was regarded to be their culture. And then he got this idea that why not to follow the journey of different keywords and see how the meanings went on changing as time passed by. Okay, and therefore he undertook this project, and then from that point onwards, the interest in culture, how people are talking about culture, what are they understanding by the term culture, and how are they claiming that word for themselves when they belong to different strata of society, different groups in society. That was the beginning of this establishment of Cultural Studies Center as well as academic studies of culture. Now we know that A.P. Thompson, who was a historian of the working class, so to say, he wrote this book about the working class people, and he described how the working class originated in England. So here we see that there is a batch of thinkers which is actually trying to understand the rise of different social classes, the rise of alternative models of, let's say, life, living life, the rise of the everyday concern, and also the rise of different political stances, which is actually looking towards more kind of democratizing the public spaces as such. So high culture, low culture, or medium culture, all such terms were discovered and were used to describe these different phenomena happening in the world. Now, cultural studies as a discipline does not have one single origin because we know that people are mobile, I mean, there are phenomena which kind of travel from one place to another. Similarly, all these academic notions also travel from the continent, European continent, to America, to different places in the world. And then we find that cultural studies grows in different countries, in different environments, and has different emphasis also. For example, in the USA, the thinkers or the researchers, they started to think more about the phenomena of reception. The mass media was emerging in the form of TV and radio, newspapers and magazines. So how people are receiving information, how are they being entertained by these channels, and how does that impact on the kinds of programs that are made for the public test. Okay, so the reception studies took let's say had a predominance in the USA, in the American cultural studies as such. Similarly, if you go to different places in the world, like Australia or towards the east, etc., you will find different kinds of cultural studies going on. Now, this is one story of cultural studies. The other story says that we had different ideologies, we had different ways of thinking about quality of life, about philosophy of life. For example, in the history, at some point we have Sashur, who comes up and says that we don't have meanings inherent in words, but we have words as empty containers, and we give meaning to the communication, to the conversation. So language is just a system. It's a system of science. Okay, so this is one kind of strain of thinking, of thought. Then on the other hand, with changing times, we have women coming up to the front and claiming their political rights and claiming that there is a different way to look at the history of the world, to what happens in the world. So we have a feminist point of view to think about public matters, right? On the third hand, we have some developments in psychology. So we have Lacan and people like that, and then we have uh, different thinkers who say that when it's like a word entering the system of language, in that way you enter the system of the world as a person, right? And that's how you find your own identity. So how do we think about our own person, our own identity, our own existence? So all these philosophical kind of thinking also went as an input into thinking of cultural studies. Then at a later stage, we had Derrida and Foucault and researchers and thinkers and writers in their own right, independent writers like that. And they say that, okay, even knowledge is an object and it is produced. So it has some color. And how it is produced and to whom it is given and how it is circulated through the world, it has its own mechanism. And we can understand that. Okay. And there is a game of power which is being played throughout. Right? And the power is not associated with one particular class or one particular group all the time. It gets distributed. So at times you find other people like some subaltern groups from the society which actually claim power for themselves, however temporarily it may be, but they also sometimes claim power. So in this way, this is a kind of big but a very serious game that is being played throughout the world. So slowly it looked as if we were trying to understand how this world behaves or operates around us, and what are the channels through which we can understand this. Okay, so I'm not going to sketch this in very many details because that is not going to be the main focus of my talk today. But I just wanted to give you certain idea about what are the inputs or what are the different kinds of places and origins and thinking spaces which goes into the making up of cultural studies as a discipline, right? Of course, there is an anthropological stance also. For example, culture basically, the study of culture basically originates from anthropology. Uh, this is a very colonial kind of phenomena, and researchers used to go to remote parts of this world and then try to understand how different tribes or groups of people are living in different parts of the world. And they used to actually take some measurements, write down thick descriptions, of their festivals, of their ways of living, etc. And then some body of knowledge used to be formed out of these data sets. But the main problem here is, do we accept that body of knowledge as it is? Or do we also attempt to analyze how it is handled? Okay, so this became a main prominent question at some point of time in the recent past. Now, when you say that cultural criticism originates from cultural studies, what I want to convey here is that cultural criticism is not limited to criticism of culture per se, but it is also a way of understanding things, which of course gives prominence to the cultural connotations of any kind of phenomena that is happening around us. Now I'm saying this in 2023 or 24, and it has got some kind of significance. What is it? मी जेव्हा असं म्हणते की कल्चरल सांस्कृतिक समीक्षा आपण जर फक्त संस्कृतीची करणार नसू आणि कोणत्याही गोष्टींची करताना त्याच्यामध्ये त्याचे सांस्कृतिक पैलू बघणार असू तर आपण नेमकं काय करतो आणि का हे इम्पॉर्टंट आहे महत्वाचं आहे आजच्या काळामध्ये बोलताना. Now we will shift our focus to our own position as people in India or people of India or even Indian citizens. In my view, our latest collective identity is citizens of a country. If we take into consideration, let us say, the long history of India or of this continent or of this physical geographical space, which now we call as the country India. तर आपल्या संपूर्ण लांबलचक इतिहासामध्ये आपल्याकडे राजे, monarchy आणि वेगवेगळ्या पद्धतीने we were colonized in different ways at different times in history. तर त्याच्यामध्ये सगळ्यात अलीकडचं आपलं अस्तित्व काय आहे तर आपलं अस्तित्व भारतीय नागरिक म्हणून आहे. That is our newest identity, collective identity. Of course, we don't really subscribe to citizenship or this identity in our everyday experience. More than that, we are interested into conveying our identity as a member of a group. म्हणजे आम्ही अमक्या जातीचे, आम्ही अमक्या धर्माचे, आम्ही मराठी बोलणारे किंवा हिंदी बोलणारे किंवा इतर कुठली भाषा. So what we give emphasis to is our linguistic, provincial, or even gender identity, caste identity, or even our social class. हे आपल्या डोक्यामध्ये आपण सहज रस्त्यावरती चाललोय, इथे येऊन बसलोय, एकमेकांशी बोलतोय, यावेळेला आपण भारतीय नागरिक आहोत असं काहीही आपल्या डोक्यामध्ये खरं जागरण नसतं. त्यापेक्षा आपण नगर कॉलेज मधले आहोत, आपण नगरचे आहोत, आपण मराठी बोलणारे आहोत, हे सगळं जास्ती आपल्या डोक्यामध्ये असतं. So I was thinking what it means to be the citizen of India. And then I realized that being a citizen of India means belonging to a different world, which is very old. And we are not really with the rest of the world, which is globalized, progressed, developed, etc. etc. Why? This occurred to me because I started thinking about what citizens of other countries or other places in the world are thinking about. What are their burning issues, important questions, big problems, and what are our big problems? आणि हे जर आपण जनरलाइज करून बघितलं तर आपल्याला असं दिसतं की पीपल इन द वर्ल्ड, इन द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, इन द डेव्हलप्ड वर्ल्ड आर थिंकिंग अबाउट डाटा सिक्युरिटी, they are thinking about migration and problem of refugee, they are thinking about resources and sustainable environment. These are their some of the concerns. And after concerns are now, as citizens of India, we are still bothered about having good roads, having potable water, having equal opportunity, So it means that our period appears to be a different time period than the rest of the world. So we are not in tune with the people from different countries. तर हे असं का आहे? And then I realized that it means that increasingly we are looking towards past rather than looking towards future. आणि आपले सगळे जे प्रॉब्लेम्स आहेत, समस्या आहेत, ज्याच्यामध्ये आपल्या सगळ्या ऊर्जेला, एनर्जीला गुंतवून ठेवतोय. All our potential, all our capacities, all our power is engaged, involved, invested into dealing with these day-to-day problems. And there seems to be no end to such kind of phenomena. हे जेव्हा माझ्या लक्षात आलं तेव्हा असं काय होतंय की ज्याच्यामुळे आपण असं मागे बघतोय असंही मला वाटायला. And then I realized that I don't require a particular theory, a particular notion, or a single viewpoint to understand this, because those things will be very insufficient to make me understand what is happening around me. So my focus was to understand what is happening around me in as much depth as possible. And then I realized that probably cultural criticism is the way out to take. अजून एक त्याला कारण आहे, which is very out and out political kind of reason, and which is that today politics is played in terms of culture. Right? If you minutely observe the statements given by different political leaders, the different kinds of political programs that they engage in, तर या सगळ्याला एक संस्कृतीची बाजू असते. Even in academics, when we have our webinars, particularly after this COVID phase, even in webinars, we are very keen on lighting the lamps. म्हणजे किती कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्टरी गोष्टी आपण करतो. Contradictory, not literally contradictory per se, but something which is out of joint, something which is not required, and why we are not able to shake off all these burdens, right? So that was the point. तर आपण अशा गोष्टी करतोय की एकीकडे आधुनिक पद्धतीने जगताना we have all those modern gadgets in our hands, but we are not modern people in our minds. So that kind of paradoxical paradoxical kind of environment that we live in. हे असं का आहे? And then I realized cultural criticism बहुतेक मला या सगळ्यामध्ये एक inroads, it makes some kind of inroad available to me. When I start thinking in terms of different notions and different concepts which are very fundamental to cultural studies, which are those notions or concepts. Some of them I explain here. Of course, it's not possible to explain them in very many details. एक गोष्ट अशी आहे की, फॉर एक्झाम्पल पॉवर. हाऊ डू वी अंडरस्टँड पॉवर? युजली आपल्याला असं एक कोणीतरी पॉवरफुल आहे आणि बाकीच्यांवर त्या सत्तेचा परिणाम होतो आहे असं बघण्याची सवय आहे. सो वी इमॅजिन वन सेंटर फॉर पॉवर. बट व्हॉट इफ वी discuss or imagine power in the form of a net, in the form of a mesh? There are different centers. They are impacting one another, and they have different degrees of significance or importance associated with them, and that makes the picture of world for us. So this is a different way of understanding power. How do we understand representation? Representation आपण कुठे बघतो तरी, let us say this is a class and we have a member who will represent the class representative, right? And we believe that that person is going to fully and finally represent the class or the interests of the class. हेच आपण आपल्या पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स बद्दल इमॅजिन करतो, आपल्या सोशल लीडर्स बद्दल हे आपण इमॅजिन करतो. But Have we ever thought about this concept itself? Representation काय आहे? It is basically a misrepresentation. When you start thinking about it, because a representation can never be the final correct representation of anything. And representation works in two ways. For example, if I click a photograph of myself, that will be my representation, my image, right? But if you keep this book there, and I can accept, this also represents me. But this is a different object. Yeah. So different, how do we understand representation? That's another concept. Third concept could be identity. We say that, okay, I am XYZ, I speak this language, I am an educated person, etc., etc. So that is my identity. But do we ever think that identity is actually a bunch of different identities? When I'm sitting here, I am a teacher. But when I'm sitting here, I'm also a colleague, I'm also a daughter, I'm also a wife, I'm also somebody's friend, etc. So I carry all these identities. I'm also a political person, I am also a researcher, I am also a writer. So I have all these identities which are kind of fluid identities, which are there in me all the time. Okay? So there is a discourse of identity. How do we understand identity? Similarly, when you try to understand other notions like gender or exploitation, okay, so these are or subject. Subject is your own. When do you have your own agency? तुम्ही सक्रिय केव्हा असता? Or, for example, do you really have any choice in different matters in your personal or public life? Market is another notion. The power of market. आपल्याला वाटतं की आपण काहीतरी चूज करतो, and that is out of our own free will, so to say. But it is not the case at all. You know, the choices are again given to you, and you select just one of them. But when you select it, how you select and what you select is also controlled by something else, some other mechanism. Data, another notion, data surveillance. आपण ज्या लूज पद्धतीने मोबाईल वापरतो, we are not at all bothered where this data is going to go and what is going to happen with that data. कारण तो permanently store पण राहू शकतो. When you are not there, or even clones पण आपले तयार, deep fake technology, etc. So we are not bothered about that. Okay, at least we don't have any consciousness of that fact in our everyday life. तर या ज्या डिफरंट कॉन्सेप्ट आहेत ना, या कॉन्सेप्ट घेऊन तुम्ही जर एखादी छोटीशी गोष्ट डिस्कस करायला लागलात तर ती का आणि कशी घडली हे लक्षात येतं. आणि नेमकं आज हे होताना दिसते. इफ यू थिंक अबाउट 2 generations बिफोर, भारतामध्ये मीडिया हॅड सम काइंड ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी, ओके, जी आता नाहीये. आता मीडिया नाहीच आहे. यू डोंट एक्सपेक्ट एनी इन्फॉर्मेशन फ्रॉम मीडिया. व्हॉट यू एक्सपेक्ट टू सी एंटरटेनमेंट, राईट? यू सी एनी वेबसाईट ऑफ एनी न्यूजपेपर, तुम्हाला काय काय दिसतं? राशी भविष्य रोज ऐकणं गरजेचं आहे का? आणि कसं दिलं असतं रोज, त्याच्यामध्ये मला फार मजा येते वाचायला, कारण ते असं अर्धवट टाकून देतात की जाणून घ्या कारण काय आहे. कशाला? We don't have that question. We click that, and their model of revenue is based on how many clicks they earn every day and every minute. But we don't know this. We don't know that mechanism. त्यामुळे आपण ते सगळं बघायला जातो आणि मग काय ज्या गोष्टी आहेत त्या विनाकारण घेत असतो. We call that as media, which it is not. तर ह्या ज्या सगळ्या गोष्टी आजूबाजूला आपल्याकडे होतात त्यांना समजावून कसं घ्यायचं? In the very first place, we need to understand that the role of culture has changed entirely. आपण संस्कृतीविषयी पूर्वी इतकं बोलत नव्हतो. संस्कृती थोडी प्रायव्हेट गोष्ट होती आपल्या घरात. आता ती इतकी पब्लिक झाली आहे, प्रचंड प्रमाणावर पब्लिक झाली आणि त्याच्यामुळे भांडणं पण लागली तेवढीच. म्हणजे अकबर आणि सीता आम्हाला चालणार नाही, लेटेस्ट सो ही नावं आपण माणसाची नाही, आपण प्राण्यांची देतोय आणि त्या प्राण्यांना नाही कळत आहे की सीता आहेत का अकबर आहे, आणि ते नाही भांडणार आहे, ते नाही एकमेकांवर बोलणार आहे, ते आपण विसरून जातो, राईट? बट वी गेट एनी काइंड ऑफ इश्यू विच इज नॉट really very fundamental, basic, important, necessary for our everyday life. आपण असा इश्यू रस्त्यावरच्या खड्ड्यांचा नाही करत. खड्ड्यांचं नाव द्या गाडी घालताना म्हणजे निदान चर्चा तरी होईल की रस्ते नीट नाहीये. पण याच्याविषयी आपण काही बोलत नाही. सो unnecessarily why are we getting involved into all these issues and quarrels and struggles and unnecessary kind of explanations? आणि मग आपण नेमकं काय करतो? Where are we going? That was a concern in my mind. तर माझ्या असं लक्षात आलं की the role of culture has altogether changed. Now culture has become a tool which earlier it was not. Okay? आणि कशाचं टूल झालंय तर ग्लोरिफिकेशनचं टूल झालंय. वी नीड टू ग्लोरिफाय आवर पास्ट आणि तेवढंच करून आपण शांत बसतो, त्याच्या पुढे काहीच करत नाही. नाउ अंडर दिस न्यू एज्युकेशन पॉलिसी वी वुड हॅव Indian knowledge system and it is supposed that the next batches will study Indian knowledge system. What kind of system is that? If you ask us, the teachers, we would not be able to say anything about that. What kind of information do we have about Indian knowledge system? And is system like that body of knowledge, are we familiar with that? No, not at all. So what are we doing? And we are saying that anything is in place because it's 2020 policy. Now we are in 2024. तर हे जे सगळे गमती चाललेल्या आहेत आपल्या आजूबाजूला या समजावून घेण्याच्यासाठी we need some kind of independent studies. We need a bunch of notions. We also need a mix of methods, which cultural studies gives us. आणि म्हणून cultural studies वेगळा काहीतरी एक अर्थ आहे असं. So culture has become a tool of glorification. It has also become a tool of empowerment. Ironically, for some classes, for some people, for some groups. Culture empowerment कसं tool बनलेलं आहे? Through way of discrimination. म्हणजे एक आमचं कल्चर खूप महत्वाचं आहे आणि ते तुमचं तसं नाहीये म्हणून आम्हाला जास्त महत्व असलं पाहिजे आणि तुम्हाला जर काही करायचं असेल तर तुम्ही आम्हाला फॉलो केलं पाहिजे. You know, so all these rituals that you see every day through TV serials. आपल्याकडे बाहेर एखादा सण येऊ द्या, तुम्हाला त्या टीव्ही सिरियल मध्ये पण तो सण आलेला दिसतो. You will have now what Nagpanchami and Savitri and all such small festivals being celebrated in the episodes which are aired on TV channels, right? But COVID may have. Has anybody watched any episode of any TV serial which showed COVID? झालं का नाही त्यांना instructions होत्या
तुम्ही
तुम्ही
कोविडचं
कोविडचं
काही
काही
दाखवू
दाखवू
नका.
नका.
आता इतकं आपल्या मेंटल परिणाम होऊ नये अशी काळजी कोणी करत असेल तर मग जे काही दाखवतात त्याचं काय होतंय आमच्या मनावर परिणाम? ऑल दोज वॅम्प्स, ऑल दोज एव्हिल kind of खलनायक kind of characters that we see through all these episodes. आणि मग ग्लोरिफिकेशन जसं कल्चर करतं तसं कल्चर एम्पॉवर पण करतं, बट नॉट, it doesn't empower all. It only empowers selected few groups in the society, and it has now become an instrument. त्यामुळं झालंय काय आपल्या बाजूला? फॉर एक्झाम्पल, मी एक याच्यात पुस्तकात पण मी ते एक्झाम्पल सुरुवातीला दिलंय की महाराष्ट्र नवनिर्माण सेना मनसे त्यांचं एक पोस्टर पूर्वी पुण्यामध्ये लावलेलं होतं आणि रेफरन्स काय होता तर बिहारमध्ये ट्रेन जाळली होती आणि त्याच्यासाठी त्यांनी त्याच्यावर असं लिहिलेलं होतं की बिहार म्हणजे असंस्कृत आणि महाराष्ट्रात जी ट्रेनच आहे तिचा वाढदिवस दरवर्षी अगदी केक वगैरे कापून ट्रेनमध्ये साजरा केला जातो. नाउ दॅट हॅज बिकम अ कल्चर, अ ट्रेडिशन. ठीक आहे, तर जे ट्रेनचा पण वाढदिवस साजरा करतो आणि हे कुठे जे ट्रेन जाळतात. सो बट व्हॉट वॉज द trope that was used for this kind of comparison? Culture. ठीक आहे, आता थेट नवीन उदाहरण घ्या. अलीकडचं पठाण सिनेमामधलं तुम्ही पाहताय की दीपिका पदुकोणच्या गाण्यावरती आक्षेप घेतला बिकॉज शी वॉज वेअरिंग अ सॅफ्रन कलर्ड बिकिनी इन दॅट सॉन्ग. व्हॉट वॉज द ऑब्जेक्शन? नॉट टू द बिकिनी बट टू द कलर. व्हॉट डज दॅट मीन? वी आर क्लेमिंग द कलर. वी आर क्लेमिंग द कलर. एकदा एका मराठी न्यूजपेपर सोसायटी मोर अँड मोर ध्रुवीकरण त्याच्यामध्ये होत जाणार आहे आणि त्याचा अर्थ असा होणार आहे की रादर दॅन एम्पॉवरिंग आवरसेल्व्स ॲज सिटिझन्स ऑफ इंडिया, वी आर गोइंग बॅक and getting ourselves kind of involved into unnecessary fights over unnecessary things. तर हा सगळा जो परिणाम आहे हा एक प्रकारे इट्स काइंड ऑफ impact which we usually experience after taking a kind of drug, है ना, की तुम्हाला समजत नाहीये काय होतंय ते, यू हॅव लॉस्ट युअर कॉन्शियसनेस, समथिंग ऑफ दॅट सॉर्ट इज हॅपनिंग हिअर. आणि म्हणून मला असं वाटलं की कल्चरल स्टडीज आणि कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम हा सगळा जो एक मेथड आहे, हा एक मार्ग आहे ऑफ डुईंग इन डेप्थ अनालिसिस, तर तो आपल्याला युजफुल असेल. देर इज अनदर रिझन फॉर विच cultural criticism seems to be a very attractive kind of proposal. होता असं की we as now we are sitting in the premises of an educational institution. We are here to study, we are here to learn and to teach. So we do understand that whatever new developments take place in our own respective fields, we look forward to learning, teaching, studying theories. Why? Because theory is a abstracted kind of understanding of what happens on the ground. That is how you understand theory. म्हणजे थिअरी समजणं म्हणजे सायन्सची असेल फॉर एक्झाम्पल, तर हवेत फेकलेल्या सगळ्या वस्तू खाली येणार आहेत बिकॉज देर इज ग्रॅव्हिटेशनल पुल. दिस इज द थिअरी, दिस इज द लॉ, राईट? इफ यू अंडरस्टँड द लॉ, you can understand how different objects are bound to come back to the earth. बरोबर? यू कॅन प्रेडिक्ट समथिंग ऑल्सो बेस्ड ऑन युअर नॉलेज ऑफ थिअरी. म्हणजे थिअरीचा काहीतरी एक वापर आपण करतो. वी यूज थिअरी इन आवर प्रॅक्टिकल एव्हरीडे लाईफ. सिमिलरली, डू वी यूज थिअरीज कमिंग फ्रॉम ह्युमॅनिटीज इन आवर प्रॅक्टिकल एव्हरीडे लाईफ? म्हणजे काय होतंय की theories before cultural studies used to give a particular, let's say, outlook on the world. Marxist criticism, for example, would primarily be concerned about talking about different social classes and difference between them in terms of income or in terms of money. Okay, the haves and the have nots, etc. etc. सायकोलॉजिकल क्रिटिसिझम तुम्हाला मेंटल मेकअपच्या बद्दल काही गोष्टी सांगू शकेल. बरोबर? तुम्ही वेगळ्या पद्धतीने काही क्रिटिसाइज केलं तर तुम्हाला तो अँगल त्याच्यामध्ये मिळेल. पण या थिअरीचा एव्हरीडे लाईफमध्ये आपण स्वतः एम्पॉवर होण्याच्यासाठी, आपण स्वतः हे जाणून घेण्याच्यासाठी कसा उपयोग करता येईल असा जर प्रश्न विचारला, तर आय सी दॅट कल्चरल स्टडीज और कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम हॅज मोर पोटेन्शियल ओव्हर द अदर्स. कारण की सगळ्या प्रकारच्या गोष्टींना कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम हँडल करू शकतं. See, there is not a single or a particular kind of text which is required for analysis. You can take anything under the sun. And this is the best kind of opportunity that cultural criticism offers us. आणि म्हणून तर आपल्या आजूबाजूला जे घडतंय ना, त्या सगळ्या गोष्टींच्या विषयी आपण अंडर कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम चर्चा करू शकतो. सो तुमचा स्कोप किती जास्त वाढतो या सगळ्या ह्याच्यामध्ये. दॅट वॉज व्हेरी अट्रॅक्टिव्ह काइंड ऑफ क्वालिटी ऑफ कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम फॉर मी. कारण की नुसतं काहीतरी एक सैद्धांतिक आकलन झालेलं आहे, सिद्धांत समजलेला आहे आणि आपण सोडून दिला, आपण त्याच्यातले एक्सपर्ट झालो आणि सोडून दिला. व्हॉट आर वी युजिंग इट फॉर? हा जो काही एक मोठा इम्पॉर्टंट क्वेश्चन असतो जो आपण ॲड्रेस करायला पाहिजे. बिकॉज एव्हरीथिंग ह्युमन कोट अँड कोट शुड बी युजफुल फॉर ह्युमन बिईंग्स ऑन अ पर्सनल और ॲट अ सोशल लेवल, असं मी तरी मानते. आणि त्यामुळे थिअरी याच्यातनं बाजूला कशी राहील? सो तुम्ही जर काही थिअरॉटिकल अंडरस्टँडिंग डिव्हेलप करत असताल, हाऊ डू यू ब्रिंग इट बॅक अँड अप्लाय इट अँड यूज इट टू अंडरस्टँडिंग वॉट एव्हर हॅपनिंग अराउंड यू एव्हरीडे लाईफमध्ये जे होते ते. तर कल्चरल स्टडीजमध्ये गंमत अशी आहे की देर इज नो वन पर्टिक्युलर काइंड ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट विच इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर कल्चरल अनालिसिस. यू कॅन टेक एनिथिंग, एनिथिंग माने लिटरली एनिथिंग that is in front of you, around you, in your environment, to be the object of analysis. This is the great power that cultural criticism has, in my view. त्यामुळे हे फार महत्वाचं होतं माझ्यासाठी की कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम कशासाठी आपण करतो. अँड देन आय स्टार्टेड thinking about whether this is really totally a very new phenomena, very new kind of analysis that we are going to undertake. What I want to say here is whether we have any kind of history of cultural studies in our own country and not in the recent past. थोडंसं आणखीन मागे जाऊ. And then I realized that probably we can revisit Mahatma Phule and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, their thoughts and their works and their actions and their politics to understand what cultural studies would mean, what cultural criticism would mean in the context of Indian situations. आणि हे का महत्वाचं आहे कारण की see the journey of these two iconic historical figures has taken place from a person to an ideology. बरोबर आहे. त्यांच्या पूर्ण आयुष्याच्या कालावधीमध्ये एक व्यक्ती म्हणून पहिल्यांदा त्यांना जे काही वाईट अनुभव घ्यायला लागले जातीपातीच्या धर्माच्या आधारावरती अँड आफ्टर दॅट त्यांनी जो इम्पॅक्ट निर्माण केला एक विचारसरणीच्या माध्यमातून एक आयडिओलॉजिकल इम्पॅक्ट ऑन द इंडियन सोसायटी दिस इज अ व्हेरी इन्स्पायरिंग जर्नी. आणि मग त्यांनी काय केलं होतं हे जर आपण बघितलं तर वी अंडरस्टँड दॅट नो सब्जेक्ट, नो इशू, नो ट्रोप, नो टेक्स्ट was kind of not include, I mean, every kind of text was included in their cultural analysis and in their cultural politics. आणि मग याच्यामध्ये काय झालेलं आहे आपण असं बघतो की फॉर एक्झाम्पल महात्मा फुले तर ही वॉज अ सोशल रिफॉर्मर अँड ही वॉज अ सोशल थिंकर अँड ही वॉज अ रायटर अँड ही वॉज अ फिलॉसॉफर ऑल्सो. सो त्यांचे हे मल्टिपल रोल्स जर आपण लक्षात घेतले तर आपल्याला लक्षात येईल की कृतीमध्ये पण विचार उतरणं हा जो भाग असतो तो त्यांच्या दोघांच्या बाबतीमध्ये आपल्याला झालेला असा दिसतो. आणि म्हणून आंबेडकर आणि फुले यांच्या विचारांना पुन्हा एकदा तपासून जर बघितलं तर इज देअर एनी पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ लुकिंग फॉर सम काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम दॅट दे हॅव ऑलरेडी डन अँड व्हॉट काइंड ऑफ कल्चरल अनालिसिस हॅव दे डन. हा एक नवा मुद्दा किंवा नवीन डायमेन्शन was there to my analysis, to my writing. And then I realized ki they thought about Indian situations in basically in terms of discrimination, exploitation. म्हणजेच ते पॉवरच्या मॉडेलशी डील करत होते की समाजामध्ये धर्माने एका विशिष्ट वर्गाला जातीला पॉवर दिलेली असेल तर ती पॉवर इतरांना कशी त्रासदायक होते आहे. म्हणजे उदाहरणार्थ ब्राह्मणी आणि अब्राह्मणी विचारसरणी ज्या मानल्या जातात दोन तर ते जे ब्राह्मण्य आहे डझंट टोटली और 100% डील विथ द कास्ट इटसेल्फ बट द मेंटल मेकअप और द काइंड ऑफ आयडिओलॉजी दॅट कम्स थ्रू दॅट पोझिशन ऑफ पॉवर इन द सोसायटी त्याला आपण ब्राह्मण्य म्हणतो म्हणून किंवा ब्राह्मणी आणि अब्राह्मणी विचार असं म्हणतो. तर हे जे काही त्यांनी सांगितलं तर ते त्यांनी सांस्कृतिक समीक्षा म्हणजे क्रिटिसिझम ऑफ कल्चर हे तर केलेलंच आहे पण त्याच्या पलीकडे जाऊन त्यांनी रिप्रेझेंटेशन पॉवर अँड इवन जेंडर I do understand and I'm fully aware that it would be a kind of ahistorical to say that they used these tropes or these notions in their analysis. पण त्यांनी जे केलेलं आहे त्याला पुढे हे नाव आपण देऊ शकतो असं तर आपण नक्की म्हणू शकतो. सो महात्मा फुलेंनी जेव्हा अभंग किंवा कविता म्हणूया आजच्या भाषेत लिहिल्या तेव्हा ते काय दाखवतायत तर दोन स्त्रियांचं एव्हरीडे लाईफ ते कम्पेअर करतात. देर इज अ फार्मर वुमन अँड देर इज अ ब्राह्मण वुमन and he compares the everyday life of these two women and he says that the Brahman woman she sits on the swing in the afternoon and she I mean even if a male person from some different caste appears in front of her he would have to bow before her वगैरे म्हणजे तिला काहीतरी एक पॉवर आहे. and what does the farmer woman do? Right from sunrise to sunset she has to work hard, she has to toil and she does not get even an iota of dignity or respect in her everyday life. आता ही जी कविता आहे, ही जेंडर टर्म्समध्ये आपण बघणार नाही, क्लास टर्म्समध्ये बघणार नाही, एक्सप्लॉयटेशन, डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, कास्ट एनालिसिसच्या टर्म्समध्ये बघणार नाही, तर कशी समजून घेणार आहोत? So why can't we say that we can see our predecessors in the form of ज्योतिबा फुले or बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर? तर मला ही एक त्याच्यामध्ये जाताना while I was exploring cultural criticism, मला हा एक अँगल त्याच्यामध्ये मिळाला. आणि नंतर मग मला असं वाटलं, की इफ वी आर लुकिंग टुवर्ड्स बिकमिंग अ नॉलेज सोसायटी, तर या नॉलेज सोसायटीमध्ये नॉलेज इज गोइंग टू बी व्हेरी इम्पॉर्टंट अँड एव्हरी पर्सन शुड हॅव सम काइंड ऑफ नॉलेज. पण हे नॉलेज नॉलेज म्हणजे काय आहे? इट इज बेसिकली अ व्हेरी ग्रेट अवेअरनेस ऑफ व्हॉट इज हॅपनिंग टू यू, why is it happening to you, what is its end, how is it going to affect your future, या प्रश्नांचं अंडरस्टँडिंग असणं. सो दॅट काइंड ऑफ अवेअरनेस शुड बी देअर इफ वी आर रिअली बिकमिंग अ नॉलेज सोसायटी. आपण त्याचा खूप लिमिटेड अर्थ घेतो. नॉलेज सोसायटी म्हणजे हे सगळं टेक्नॉलॉजी असायला पाहिजे आणि सगळं मॉडर्न दिसलं पाहिजे आणि वी शुड बी वेल व्हर्स्ड विथ युझिंग ऑल दीज मॉडर्न डिव्हायसेस, इंटरनेट 5G पाहिजे. या सगळ्या गोष्टींना आपण नॉलेज सोसायटी म्हणायला लागलेलो आहोत किंवा सगळं पेपरलेस गव्हर्नन्स पाहिजे वगैरे वगैरे. पण हे त्याचे काही ॲस्पेक्ट्स आहेत जे त्याचं कोअर मिनिंग असायला पाहिजे आहे, दॅट इज एम्पॉवरिंग द सिटिझन्स. आणि एम्पॉवरमेंट इज अ व्हेरी ट्रिकी वर्ड. See, you cannot give, I suppose this girl, she doesn't have a, let's say, pen or a book, and I give it to her and I say that she has been empowered like that. You cannot empower people by gifting them with different things. You need to build the skills. You need to build that awareness. You need to build that criticality. जर आपण केलं तर आपण नॉलेज सोसायटीचा काही एक अर्थ लावू शकू असं मला वाटलं. सो व्हॉट काइंड ऑफ थॉट कॅन रिअली हेल्प अस कॉमन सिटिझन्स, कॉमन पीपल टू रिअली एम्पॉवर अवरसेल्व्स, ही एक कन्सर्न जर ठेवली तर मला असं वाटतं की कल्चरल क्रिटिसिझम त्याच्यामध्ये मदत करू शकतं. आणि या सगळ्या लेट अस से प्रिमायसेसवर आधारित असं माझं जे म्हणणं आहे, माझं जे प्रपोजिशन आहे, माझं जे आर्ग्युमेंट आहे, ते मी या पुस्तकामध्ये मांडण्याचा प्रयत्न केला. And therefore, I call it as समकालीन, that is contemporary, because I'm bothered about the contemporary concerns. I'm talking about 21st century. I'm talking about the latest collective identity called Indian citizenship. I'm talking about the current concerns of, let's say, gender, power, subjectivity, media, market forces, etc., etc. And therefore, it is contemporary cultural criticism. आणि मग मला असं जाणवलं की वॉट एव्हर आय हॅव रिटन इन रिसेंट पास्ट, फॉर एक्झाम्पल देर इज one article which I wrote about Saregama, Little Champs, which I refer to. I have written a few articles on a few Marathi as well as Hindi movies. There are some articles on Marathi plays, Marathi theatre, and there are some articles which deal with different kinds of observations. For example, how sports is gendered, or let's say how the questions of translation do not necessarily remain restricted to the phenomena or the process of translation. They expand beyond those horizons वगैरे. तर हे जे सगळं मी करत होते, लिहित होते, ते नेमकं मी काय करते. सो इन अ वे इट वॉज ऑल्सो अ काइंड ऑफ डिस्कवरी ऑफ माय ओन criticism, which I then preferred to call as cultural criticism. सो इथपर्यंत येऊन हा प्रवास थांबतो आणि द आउटपुट ऑफ दॅट जर्नी इज दिस पर्टिक्युलर बुक कॉल्ड समकालीन सांस्कृतिक समीक्षा. अँड आय रोट इट इन मराठी फॉर 2 रिझन्स. एक असं होतं की मी अगोदर जे लेख लिहिले होते ते मी मराठीमध्ये लिहिले होते आणि दुसरं मला याच प्रवासामध्ये आय रिअलाइज्ड दॅट वर्नाक्युलर डिस्कोर्सेस आर ऑल्सो व्हेरी इम्पॉर्टंट. भारतीय भाषांमधलं लिखाण असलं पाहिजे. कारण असं नाही ना, की सगळंच नॉलेज फक्त इंग्लिशमध्ये आहे. मग तशा तर जगात 5,000च्या वर भाषा आहेत. बाकीच्या भाषांचं काय? म्हणजे इतकं का आपण लोगोसेंट्रिक ते करायचं? इतकं का आपण युरोसेंट्रिक ते करायचं? इतकं का ते आपण अँड्रोसेंट्रिक करायचं? राइट? आणि म्हणून ते थोडंसं पॉवर बॅलन्सच एका अर्थाने सांभाळण्याच्यासाठी आय प्रेफर टू राईट इट इन मराठी. सो नाव दिस बुक हॅज 2 sections, 2 parts. The first part deals with development of cultural studies as a discipline, as I explained. अजून डिटेलमध्ये ते जातं आणि whether we can revisit फुले अँड आंबेडकर इन दॅट सेन्स. आणि सेकंड पार्ट जो आहे त्याच्यामध्ये काही आर्टिकल्स लिहिले, म्हणजे आधी प्रकाशित झालेले प्री पब्लिश्ड आर कलेक्टेड टुगेदर. सो दिस इज अ काइंड ऑफ अँथॉलॉजी ऑल्सो ऑफ माय ओन critical articles. So that is it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Madhuri, for a very lucid account of origin and nature of cultural studies, and also for giving us a sense of how it can be used in our own context. In fact, one of the reasons why we wanted you to speak to us is to give our students this understanding that cultural studies is not something that is only done by Europeans and which is something that's there in the syllabus, and it's only there in English. Because sometimes, because we studied in the English department, and sometimes these are there in the syllabus, students tend to think that it's something that's necessarily foreign.
Yeah.
So I wanted them to get this idea that this is something that we can also do. And I'm happy that you emphasized that and in fact showed us the way how each one of us also can engage ourselves in this method of understanding ourselves in our context, and I think that's that. Thank you so very much. So now maybe we can ask any comments. We have a lot of colleagues. Thank you for coming. If you have any comments or if you have any questions, either by my colleagues from the various departments or the students, we can interrogate
Yeah.
Madhuri ma'am's submissions.
Yeah.
Do you see any similarity or difference in Indian way of thinking and European way of thinking?
Rather than similarity, there are more differences than similarities, I guess. So, see, it's very difficult to generalize any way of thinking as Indian or European, because thinking is a very subjective process also, right? The Indian way of thinking, I don't know what kind of way could be called as Indian way of thinking, because we have different locales, we have different spaces in which we operate, right? And in which Indian thinkers have operated for ages together. But then, rather than way of thinking, I would like to rephrase your question as what are the concerns for these two groups of thinkers different? And I would say yes. And when I tried to understand cultural studies, I also thought about modifying certain concepts. For example, you take the concept of exploitation or discrimination. You can see that there is racial discrimination in the Western countries, but you don't find it here. Rather, you would see caste discrimination as a very sensitive area and a sensitive concern for all of us. So, or if you think of gender, the discrimination against feminine gender would not be of similar kinds in these different societies. We have more of patriarchy, so our questions are different, our concerns are different, and following the same logic, even the way we would empower ourselves would be different. So rather than calling it as way of thinking, I would say the concerns are different. Yeah. Yeah.
As a critic, what do you expect from native Indians as modern, as you said, modern Indians? What do you expect from them to be a modern citizens?
Well, I'll try to pitch this question in the community of students. And I'll give you one example, and I'll try to make you understand what could be the answer to your question. See, all you students need to open this academic bank account, right, for filling the exam forms. Now, all of you have mobile phones, and you know that you just have to log into the website, open an account, then you'll get the account number which you need to provide into your examination form. But I find that many students don't know how to do this, even if they have been using mobile phones for 10 years now. They don't know. So I understood a new meaning of digital divide. There is a term called digital divide, which means that some sections of society do not have access to digital technology like mobile phones or internet or other things, other devices based on the internet technology. That was very well understood or popular meaning of digital divide. But in my view, there is a new dimension added to this meaning, which says that even if you have access, physical access to the digital technology or devices, you don't know what to do. You don't know how to operate that. So even though you have access, you don't know how it is used or how you can do your work using those devices, right? So this is another kind of digital divide that we are facing now. So when I say that we have already declared that we would be a knowledge society soon, just like we have declared that we are going to be a 5 trillion economy soon. What would that mean? So I expect that we, as citizens of India or just as members of Indian society, should know what is happening around us. We should understand different discourses. Now, I don't expect that everybody would be at the same level of understanding. There will be differences among people, that I do acknowledge. But still, right now it is like there is a veil of ignorance that everyone has covered himself or herself with, and people do not have any will to lift it up and to see the world and to take in all those shocking observations or experiences which you might come across. So you don't understand what is. See, there was this thinker called Althusser who used this term called interpellation, and he said that suppose that you are walking down the street and suppose a police person calls you. He says, hey, and you stop and you look back and you think that you are called by the police. Now, the police is a male person. Suppose you are also a male person. So actually, only one human being is calling the other. But that is not the case here. You think that the government is calling you because the police person becomes a representative of power, right, of law, which has some hold over you, and you become a citizen. You don't remain yourself, right? Similarly and parallelly, if you see, then if you want to call yourself as a citizen, you should know what it means. What are your responsibilities? What are your, let's say, your rights? What are what is your accountability towards the society? What is it that you should ask for? What is it? We don't, very simple things like we don't bother to read any document as such. We simply are interested in signing it as quickly as possible. We are not bothered. I'm talking of very, very simple everyday experiences, because I have increasingly started believing in this, that we should start right from the ground level, right from the scratch, right? So we don't ever question the need of producing our Aadhaar ID card in any and in any offices or to any person who asks for it. Why do you require to give your biometric identity at every place? The student, they, even while opening this academic bank account, there are 10 options available. You can produce your driving license also. It is very likely that students will have driving licenses, but people don't even scroll down the list. They simply find Aadhaar and they produce the Aadhaar. Everywhere you give your biometric data. What is happening to that? Do you have any control over your bodily information? And with this deep fake technology and all, don't you think it will increasingly become, or for example, even teachers like us, when we need to type longer notices and longer messages on WhatsApp groups, we simply voice type it. It is painful to type that long message, but we don't become creative and try to, kind of shorten the message. We don't take any efforts at that. Rather, we prefer voice typing. But you forget at that moment that you are giving a voice sample to the AI technology. You are empowering that technology free of cost. You're not getting anything out of that. Okay. So being aware of all these things is very necessary. We don't read newspapers. I don't recommend that we should read newspapers, but yes, barring one or two newspapers. But otherwise, where are we getting our analysis from? If you go and see the discussion programs, the chit chats on TV channels, they are useless. Like, it's only drama. I see performances everywhere. Being a researcher of theater, everywhere I find there's no, simple exchange of thoughts. It's all the time performance. A teacher performs in the class. A political leader performs in a political meeting. An anchor performs in a ceremony or in some discussion in some program. So these are the things that we need to be very careful about. And as far as possible, we need to obtain basic information. And we also need to obtain the skills of understanding the basic information. Plus, we also need to gather or garner the courage to ask questions. That is what I expect when I say that we need to be aware of the situation around us. Yeah. There are many things, but for time being, I think this is sufficient.
Ma'am, there is a question on, from an online viewer named Narendra Gauri. He asks, how does cultural criticism account for the impact of globalization on local culture and tradition?
The impact of cultural criticism.
Yes, on globalization. Impact of globalization on local culture.
Globalization, the impact of globalization on local culture. That is what he is asking. Yeah. Okay. This will take us to an important aspect of cultural criticism, which is regarding uh, the appearance or the nature of cultural experience for all of us. See, we belong to a very diverse kind of society, basically in India, and we see that the person who is sitting next to us can speak a different language, can have a different cuisine culture, can have a different liking and taste and understanding for uh, the clothes, the clothing, etc., etc. So here we have a great variety of cultures coming together, right? But what is globalization doing to this great variety of culture? I'll try to explain this by way of giving you an example. Do you remember the advertisement for Cadbury chocolates? One of the advertisements. It used to say, Kuch meetha ho jaye. And they used to show different occasions. Like, for example, there's a newborn calf, right? And you want to celebrate that occasion, so you bring Cadbury chocolates, right? Or somebody tops in an examination and you distribute Cadbury chocolates. So every time there is a cause for celebration, you celebrate that emotion by eating or consuming chocolates. Now, a critic like me would like to pose a question. When in India we have different kinds of sweets and they are distributed all across the country region wise also, and we can make sweets out of, let's say, a flour, out of fruits, out of milk, out of this and that. There are so many ingredients which can go into making of different kinds of sweets in our country. What is happening to this diversity of sweets and to the diversity of culture when we see the advertisement at least 50 times a day? It slowly is gets imbibed into us that, okay, Mitha equal to Cadbury, chocolates. Right? So you remember the brand also, and you also learn that chocolates is the sweet, and you forget. Or take some other example. For instance, we used to make halwa or kheer or some such sweet at home to celebrate festivals or even to celebrate our birthdays. But now we bring cakes, we buy cakes. We don't make cakes. I mean, many people do make cakes, but it's still not a very ordinary cultural practice in each and every household to bake a cake for a birthday, right? So we buy cakes. Where did this come from? That is the impact of globalization on local. It flattens our cultural experience. It flattens our diversity. It it takes it out. The pleasure that is there in enjoying the diversity of things, it takes it out. It also takes out or nullifies the respect that we used to have for other cultures because we don't value them. If you value something, you do have some respect for that thing in your mind. When you don't value it, now you prepare some halwa for your brothers and sisters or your children, they would not like it. They would feel like they have become very poor. You don't have money to buy a cake or what, you know. So the nature of response or the responses themselves have changed. Why did they change? You don't say noodles, you say Maggie. Why? Maggie is a brand. It's not the name which describes the different kind of food. That name is noodles. You don't use noodles, you say Maggie. Even on the menus which you may have in the canteen, Maggie would be written as one of the menus, right? Why did this happen? And how did this happen? And when did this happen? Ask questions, and you'll automatically understand the impact of globalization on the diverse kind of local cultures that you have. Well, I'm not, following this logic, I'm not going to say that India is great or Indian culture is great. I'm not going to fall into that trap. Please remember that. But still, I'm stopping in between and just saying that we are losing some kind of potential here. So you should be very keen on understanding this phenomena.
मॅडम
Huh.
आपल्याकडे सध्या मॉडर्निटीवर आपण सांगितलं किंवा मॉडर्निझम सांगण्याकडे कल असतो वगैरे किंवा कल्चरल मॉडर्निझम वगैरे आणि भारत सुद्धा तर गव्हर्नमेंट सांगतं की 2047 मध्ये विकसित भारत संकल्प वगैरे आपण हे मॉडर्न विकसित म्हणजे मॉडर्न कल्चरकडे किंवा मॉडर्निझमकडे आपण जातोय. मॉडर्निझमकडे जात असताना गव्हर्नमेंट सांगतं की अमृत काल वगैरे वगैरे हे शब्द वापरतात. म्हणजे गव्हर्नमेंट on the one hand wants to be modern and on the other hand it wants to bring old culture. So is it possible to become modern with old culture or ancient culture? What do you think?
It is not possible. The straightforward answer is going to be it is not possible. But try to understand the gimmick of the word itself. Amrut, what is Amrut? It's an imaginary thing. तुम्हाला कोणालाही अमृत कधी पाहायला मिळालंय का? फोटोत तरी पाहायला मिळालंय का? हातात नसेल मिळालं. इट्स अन इमॅजिनरी थिंग ना. कुठून येतो हा शब्द? कुठून येतो हा स्वर्ग, नरक, अमृत, कामधेनू, काही पण असे शब्द तुम्ही घेऊ शकता. हे आपल्या संस्कृतीतनं येतात. सो व्हॉट इज द पॉलिटिकल अँड कल्चरल गेम हिअर? द गेम or the move here is to politicize culture and to create a culture out of politics. दोन्ही साईडने आहे ते. म्हणजे तुम्ही असे शब्द वापरा जे तुम्हाला काहीतरी एक छान वाटायला भाग पाडतील. अमृत म्हटल्यावर कोणाला वाईट वाटलं असं तर होणार नाहीये. सो अमृतचा अर्थ कळो वा न कळो, ते खरं नाहीये हे पण कळो वा न कळो, पण ऐकल्याबरोबर छान वाटलं पाहिजे. सो इट्स a feeling good kind of atmosphere which gets created when you use such nomenclature. तुम्ही असे शब्द जेव्हा छान वाटतं. मग त्याच्या अंडर काय आहे आम्हाला माहिती नाहीये. बरोबर ना? त्यामुळे मॉडर्नाइज होणं आणि आपल्या ह्याचा अभिमान बाळगणं, या 2 चुकीच्या किंवा दोन्ही वेगळ्या दिशेने तोंड केलेल्या गोष्टी अगदी आहेत आणि आपण मध्ये ओढले जातो आहोत इंडियन सिटिझन्स म्हणून. त्याचं कारण असं आहे, की आपल्याकडं इन जनरल पुन्हा एकदा आय इन्सिस्ट ऑन गिव्हिंग एक्झाम्पल्स बिकॉज आय फील दॅट abstraction does not at times lead to a proper kind of understanding of these terms. मी उदाहरण तुम्हाला असं देईन, की आपल्या घरामध्ये आपण इटालियन मार्बल वगैरे लावत असतो. आपल्याकडे मायक्रोवेव्ह वगैरे सारखी साधनं पण आपण घेत असतो किचनमध्ये. पण अनेक घरांमध्ये जे असं सुसज्ज असतं, तिथं सूनबाई डोक्यावर पदर घेऊन येतात आणि त्या डिशेस ठेवून निघून जातात. त्या पाहुण्यांबरोबर बसून नाश्ताही करत नाहीत, चहाही पीत नाहीत, बोलत पण नाहीत. कारण त्यांनी असं करणं घरातल्या पुरुषप्रधान संस्कृतीला मान्य नसतं. मग तुमचं इटालियन मार्बल आणि मायक्रोवेव्हचं काय करायचं? सो मॉडर्न इन ऍक्शन्स, मॉडर्न इन थॉट अँड मॉडर्न इन गॅजेट्स. फॉर इंडियन्स दीज आर 3 म्युच्युअली एक्सक्लुसिव्ह स्फिअर्स. आपण ते मिक्सच करत नाही. जेव्हा की आणि ह्याचं का असं होत असेल असाही मला प्रश्न पडतो. माझं उत्तर त्याला असं आहे, की आपण या वस्तू बनवत नाही, आपण सगळं इम्पोर्ट करतो आणि आपलं कल्चर त्याच्यामुळे सुटत नाही, तेही तसंच राहतं आणि वस्तू नुसत्या बाहेरनं आणणं सोपं आहे ना. मतलब यू कॅन ब्रिंग अ व्हेरी हाय फंडा काइंड ऑफ मे बी शॉर्ट स्कर्ट, काइंड ऑफ व्हेरी फॅशनेबल, अल्ट्रा फॅशनेबल ड्रेस, but you will have to get up and prepare tea for your father. You cannot ask your father, go and make tea for me also. असं चेष्टेने पण तुम्ही म्हणू शकत नाही. मग तुमच्या त्या मॉडर्न अपारलचं, मॉडर्न स्टाईलचं काय करायचं? तर हा तिढा, पॅराडॉक्सिकल सिच्युएशन जी आहे ना, ती निर्माण होते आणि ती भारताच्या बाबतीमध्ये अगदी झालेली आहे. आणि म्हणून मला असं वाटतं, की ॲक्च्युअली तुम्ही म्हणालात ते चांगलं आहे, की नावं जी दिलेली आहेत आणि त्याच्यामध्ये एक पॉलिटिकल क्रिटिक पण आहे. फॉर एक्झाम्पल, मायावती क्रिटिसाइज्ड दिस पॉलिसी ऑफ गिफ्टिंग द पुअर पीपल विथ ग्रेन. ते काय 5 वर्ष पुढे देऊ असं त्यांच्या सगळी योजना जी आहे. त्या म्हणाल्या, की यू आर मेकिंग स्लेव्स आउट ऑफ पीपल. तुम्ही कोणाला गिफ्ट देता? म्हणजे पूर्वी आपल्या गोष्टींमध्ये वर्णन असायचं ना, राजाने गळ्यातली कंठा काढला आणि बक्षीस दिला किंवा अंगठी काढली आणि बक्षीस दिली. पण the servant is going to remain a servant. The slave is going to remain a slave. This is not the right way of empowering people. असं त्यांनी त्याच्यामध्ये म्हटलेलं आहे. तर आपण जेव्हा हे सगळ्या बाजूनी बघतो ना या गोष्टी, तेव्हा त्याच्यामधलं मूव्ह काय आहेत, पॉलिटिकल मूव्ह हे आपल्या लक्षामध्ये येतं आणि इट विल बी रिअली detrimental to us if we start believing in whatever comes across us. काय शब्द येत आहेत, काय नावं येत आहेत, काय टायटल्स येत आहेत, काय ऍक्शन्स दिसत आहेत. इफ यू स्टार्ट बिलिव्हिंग दॅट येस दे आर राईट अँड करेक्ट अँड इफ यू डिनाय इवन टू लुक बियॉन्ड दॅम, तर खरंच प्रॉब्लेम होऊ शकतो. तुमच्या स्वतःसाठीच प्रॉब्लेम होऊ शकतो. कारण दिस फिनॉमिना इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी लिमिटेड टू युअर पॉलिटिकल बिहेवियर. दिस इज गोइंग टू सीप इन टू युअर एव्हरीडे बिहेवियर. तुम्ही तुमच्या आयुष्यात जे घडतंय ते पण असंच स्वीकारणार आहात मग. त्याचा पॉलिटिकल याच्याशी संबंध डायरेक्टली असो वा नसो, मग हे जे स्वीकारणं आहे हे आंधळेपणानं स्वीकारणं होईल आणि म्हणून तो मॉडर्नायझेशनचा प्रॉब्लेम होतो. भारताच्या बद्दल असंही म्हटलं जातं, की नो रेव्होल्युशन कुड एव्हर बी ऑर कॅन एव्हर बी सक्सेसफुल इन इंडिया बिकॉज रेव्होल्युशन वुड मीन दॅट द ओल्ड शुड डाय अँड इट शुड मेक स्पेस फॉर द न्यू टू कम. आपल्याकडचं जुनं जे आहे ते जातच नाही, आपण त्याला घालवत नाही, आपण त्याला सोडूनही देत नाही. मी एक उदाहरण याच्यामध्ये असं लिहिलं, की भारतीयांचं एक आवडतं चित्र असतं, की कुटुंब, मग आजी आजोबा, मग आईने स्वयंपाक करायचा, मुलांना वाढवायचं, बाबांनी पगार कमवायचा, म्हाताऱ्या माणसांनी ईश्वर चिंतन करायचं, देवळात जायचं. हे छान आहे, पण हे कोणत्या काळातलं चित्र आहे? कुठलं चित्र आहे हे? कुठे शक्य आहे हे? कुठे शक्य आहे? एकत्र फॅमिलीज राहू शकतात का? त्याला प्रॅक्टिकल प्रॉब्लेम्स नसतात का? घरात 3 खोल्या, राहणारी जोडपी 3 म्हणजे 6 मोठी माणसं. कसं करणार आहात? तुमचं इन्कम किती? तुमच्या वेळा काय? ज्या खोलीमध्ये टीव्ही आहे तिथेच मुलं अभ्यास करणार आहेत, तिथेच आजी आजोबा सिरियल बघणार आहेत, तिथेच आणखी कोणी काय करणार आहे. कसं शक्य आहे? म्हणजे या प्रॅक्टिकल गोष्टी ज्या आहेत किंवा तुम्हाला अंतरं किती आहेत मुंबईसारख्या ठिकाणी, इव्हन पुण्यासारख्या ठिकाणी, ऑफिसला जायचंय, यायचंय. 1.5 3 तास तुमचे मोडणार आहेत. काय एनर्जी तुम्हाला राहणार आहे? वगैरे, वगैरे. म्हणजे आपण प्रॅक्टिकल थिंकिंग त्याचा विचार सोडून दिलाय आणि केवळ हे असं ड्रीम आहे आणि ते आम्हाला पाहिजे म्हणून त्याला चिटकून बसलेलो आहोत. सो दॅट इज बिग ऑब्स्टॅकल इन बिकमिंग मॉडर्न, सो टू से. मॉडर्न हा पण शब्द प्रॉब्लेमॅटिक आहे बिकॉज तो एका इतिहासाच्या किंवा विचारसरणीच्या एका टप्प्यावर आहे. आपण तर पोस्ट मॉडर्न आणि त्याच्याही पुढे आलेलो आहोत. आपण पोस्ट ट्रुथ पर्यंत आलेलो आहोत खरं तर. म्हणजे त्या विचारसरणीच्या नुसार पाहायचं झालं तर ही खरं जुनीच गोष्ट आहे जी आपण आता बोलतोय ती. ओके, या.
I have another question. It's not a question, but maybe an observation, as you said that
Sure.
we should look at something that is so routine,
Hmm.
the changes that are happening in routine. So recently, posting about cuisine, about food, about recipes is something that is happening.
Hmm.
And the Indian kitchen is changing.
Hmm.
So before, measuring something was about measuring with our senses, with our hands, with our smell,
Hmm.
with listening to the cracking of the oil.
Hmm.
And now gadgets have come up. You see every other video on YouTube talk about the measurement through measuring spoons.
Yes.
And this kind of change is happening. And as you know, another question pointed out about modernism and about globalization. That ingredients which were actually very exotic
Yes.
have become local.
Yeah.
So even if I go to a very small shop, which is a very small shop, and you go there for buying groceries, and they pronounce mayonnaise properly, which I can't pronounce, but they will be able to, or they will have all the ingredients which were rather exotic, and now they have become local. So could you just give your views on this change in the kitchen, since I know that you love food and you have written about it also.
Yes, your observations are very correct, and I do agree with them. But I understand this phenomena as abundance of objects and objects cluttering our homes. So this is how the market changes or impacts our lives. That is how I would like to understand it. Whether it is for good or for bad, that is, I think, very subjective view. But yes, as an observation, I'll give you another observation also. For example, if you go to any supermarket or some such place, you'll find that there are different containers for different things. For example, you'll have something as pen holder, but you have similar kind of object as toothbrush holder. You'll have one thing as waste paper basket, and you'll have another to be kept on your kitchen, what do you call that thing? Platform. Yes, kitchen platform, which you'll use to throw the wet garbage, so to say. Okay, so Tushibak phenomena, that is what I call it. You go into markets and you buy so many, and this does not remain confined to kitchen or to your rooms in the house, but it also uh, enters into your religious life also. For example, if I am a working woman and I do want to celebrate a festival, but I don't have space or time, and I cannot go with other women in my neighborhood to perform a puja, then I bring something from the market which I keep in the house and I worship that, and I get the satisfaction of celebrating that festival. Take the example of Vata Savitri. One is supposed to go to a banyan tree and then worship that tree, right? But the trees are not there and you cannot really access the tree. So what you do is you bring certain picture of the tree or even a twig of the tree, keep it in your house and you worship it. Actually, you are defeating the original purpose of that festival if you really believe in that. But that is how the market has also entered in your emotional life. In what way? For example, if you hurt somebody's feelings, you are not expected to go and say sorry. I mean, just a word should suffice to ask pardon, but you should go and buy a greeting card. You should go and buy some small trinket and gift it and then say sorry. And then that that sorry will sound more authentic, so to say. So this is how, this is abundance of things, the McDonaldization of life. That is how it is described usually. Why McDonaldization? Because like the McDonald burger, which is very mechanically produced. That is how I would describe that procedure, because as she said, every ingredient needs to be measured, and then there is a standard procedure of how you prepare that dish, and there is also a very organized way of selling it. So in each and every outlet of McDonald's, you'll get the same wrapping, the same size, the same price, same kind of interior of the shop, etc., etc. So it's the same thing that is happening to us. So we are transformed into customers and consumers. We don't have our unique identity vis-a-vis the market. I mean, we are only buyers, we are only customers, we are only consumers. And if the market is very generous, very kind, then it will give you different choices. That's all. Suppose she likes chocolate, so she will get a chocolate flavored milk. If she likes almonds, then she will get an almond flavored milk, something of that sort. So that diversity or difference in your choices would be taken care of, but finally you'll be cluttered with things, cluttered with objects. Your all sides of your personality will be affected because of that. Yeah.
There's an online question by Jan.
Okay.
This is regarding your book. What is the basic proposal of this book? Theorizing the cultural practices around, or to read and describe them within the realm of available theory?
Actually, to read and describe within the available thing. That is the basic purpose. But the basic purpose of this book is also to intervene into a kind of public and political discourse. Because one of the main and to me attractive qualities of cultural criticism is this, that it doesn't shy away from making interventions. तुम्ही जेव्हा एखादी गोष्ट एक्सप्लेन करता, when you explain something, when you analyze something, you are providing a different viewpoint and you are trying to affect the thinking of people around you, and that is a kind of intervention. बरोबर? So cultural criticism does it without feeling embarrassed about it. And it says that to convey your point of view across is actually a kind of contribution to the discourse that is going around you. And that is the main purpose of this book. Yeah. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we can wind up. Yeah. Sure.
I think it has. We have our thinking hats on the whole day, thinking about everything and observing, ma'am. We're so grateful that you have switched on a light bulb in our minds, that we will observe everything that we look around with the same perspectives, rather. Thank you so much. So on behalf of the English department and all my colleagues, I extend my deepest gratitude to all those who have contributed to making this lecture series and this lecture especially a great success. I would like to also thank our esteemed speaker, Dr. Madhuri Dixit, whose perspectives, whose sharing have really impacted the way we think. I think we will be truly, and all our students would agree, that you have added much more in our brains, and while we go out, it will really be very helpful for us. And I would also like to thank our HOD, Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, who always encourages us to think, and also encourage many other people to come here and join us, and also to engage in these kind of discussions. I would like to thank all the faculty members from various departments who have come here. And as ma'am said, that it is not just one stream of thought in cultural studies, and it's the contribution of all these different faculties and streams of thought that come together and think. And we appreciate that you have come here and joined in this discussion. I also would like to thank Gaurav sir, who has very well carried out his mission in handling the technical aspect of it, and we're very grateful, sir. I would like to thank all my colleagues who have always supported such endeavors that we have been through, and I would like to thank the audience who is present online and offline for all these questions that you've asked, and these questions that because you've asked, we are able to ask ourselves. So I'm really grateful for everyone present here. Thank you very much, ma'am.
We will see our colleagues from other departments speak to us in the days to come.